Dear colleagues, my dear research scholars and students, greetings to all of you. I hope you all stay safe at home during this corona pandemic period. I welcome you all to this webinar on literary theory and criticism. There are varieties of theories emerging in the recent trends in literature and criticism, and the theories like diaspora, subaltern theory, or the post-feminist or checklist feminist theories are emerging. But it is the fact that a discourse is power, as Michel Foucault puts it. Discourse is power, and every discourse is arbitrarily constructed, and meaning is a kind of arbitrariness. Meaning is not a fixity. Meaning is a referentiality, meaning is a multiplicity, and meaning is an interpolation. And any discourse is like an onion with layers after layers, or layers over the layers. Thanks to Derrida, deconstructionist approach to diaspora would make us understand how the term diaspora can be looked at from different perspectives, not only from the perspective of the migrants, whether forcibly dispersed or willingly migrated. In either case, a broader understanding of the term diaspora would make us understand that it is not only referring to the migrants. And who are the diasporans then? And what is diaspora? And what are the multidimensional forms inextricably pervasive in all walks of human life? And keeping these viewpoints in mind, I have framed my topic as diaspora, a deconstructionist stance. Diaspora, a deconstructionist point of view. I hope the PowerPoint presentations would make us understand the lecture with a visual effect. So for a better understanding, I hope now we shall look at the diaspora, a deconstructionist stance. Diaspora can be looked at from different perspectives, and in this lecture, we will look at diaspora from Derridian point of view. If you look at the origin of the word diaspora, it refers to the dispersion of Jews from Israel to Babylonia. And terms like, if you look at diaspora, the terms like diaspora, hybridity, post-colonialism appear in the writings of Homi Bhabha. So when we look at Homi Bhabha's phraseology, we can clearly understand in one of his books, Nation and Narration, he says, I quote, narratives like nations and nations like narratives lose their origins in the midst of time. everything loses its origin in the midst of time. And if we look at the hermeneutics of meaning, there was a time when meaning was understood from theocentric point of view. And theocentric meaning later became logocentric meaning, or iconcentric meaning, or image-centric meaning. And from logocentrism to meaning emerged into an egocentric structure. When Derrida talks about structure as a whole, he further puts it in detail, structure as substructures or semi-structures, and the peripheral marginal structures. Structures at the outer sphere create the structure called the center. And from Derrida's point of view, there is neither a center nor a margin. Keeping this point in mind, we would like to look at diaspora as an international problem. You know, Jonathan P. Sell says, I quote, these have been critiqued for their euphoric overtones, which critics argue ignore the sufferings of the underprivileged and do not pay sufficient attention to historical, geographical, and political context. You know, diaspora can be looked at as a territorial issue. Diaspora is a political construction, and diaspora is the problem of the underprivileged, not the privileged. Diaspora, certainly from Derridian point of view, is not the problem of the privileged sections of the society. It is the problem of the underprivileged. It is the problem of the homeless. It is the problem of the marginalized. It is the problem of the minority sections of the society. Diaspora may refer to migration, forced migration especially, and later in the name of business, in the name of profession, or in the name of labor. Migrations took place for many reasons. But broadly speaking, diaspora can be looked at psychologically as an innate problem in every discourse, an innate problem in every individual. You know, the richest Indian diaspora is in the US. Statistics say that 1% of the total US population amounts to the diasporans. And secondly, Mexico has got the largest diaspora. So for example, 12 million. And the third largest population, diaspora population, right, could be found in Russia and China. You know, there are some theoretical innovations. So for example, Edward Said, Homi Bhabha, Gayatri Spivak, Stuart Hall, Paul Guillory, James Clifford, and others have vitalized diaspora studies, challenging the ways of thinking beyond the confines of the nation state. So beyond the confines of the nation state, diaspora can be looked at from different perspectives. You know, there are some assumptions about diaspora. The diasporan communities maintain a myth or a collective memory of their homeland. They think that the ancestral home is a real home. They eventually wish to return to their homeland. The diasporans are committed to the restoration and maintenance of the homeland. They relate personally or vicariously. They think that their homeland shapes their identity. And these are some assumptions of the migrants. But apart from these assumptions, there are unidentified, unnoticed, and innumerable diasporans in every nook and corner of the world. You know, Brubaker and Nyman, the two scholars, opine that there is hyper-canonization which can be found in diaspora or diasporic literature. African and Caribbean writers are most likely to be represented, though the influence of diaspora theory is shown in the increased representation of contemporary transcultural writing. So, Brubaker's opinion is this: professional communities of individuals, no longer in their homeland, can also be considered diaspora. So, for professions, for odd jobs and labor, people migrate and they undergo a sense of non-belongingness, and this sense of non-belongingness, or what you call, Derrida would call it the other. The sense of otherness makes them feel diasporant. And apart from these opinions, there is Tololian, who argues that the media have used the term corporate diaspora. Corporate diaspora. At the beginning, as I told you, the entire discourse called literature, or literature called discourse, is arbitrary in its nature. So the arbitrariness can extend its meaning to the corporate sector of the society, and which Tololian calls corporate diaspora. And from corporate diaspora, we can further extend the sense of non-belongingness to various other fields. You know, the victim diaspora, indigenous diaspora, subaltern diaspora, women diaspora, Dalit diaspora, minority diaspora, and cultural diaspora. We will look at a few more perspectives of diaspora in the next slides. You know, victim diaspora. Victim diaspora refers to the community or the sections of people who are victimized. The victimized sections of society are diasporans. In the same society, in the same community, in the same religion, and in the same locality or territory, some people are victimized and they are diasporant. And those victimized people are the indigenous communities, and therefore we can call it as indigenous diaspora. And all these people in different diasporic experiences share a kind of commonality. Let it be victim or indigenous or subaltern or women, Dalit, minority, or the cultural minority. All these groups share some commonality in the understanding of the term diaspora. You know, Antonio Gramsci used the word subaltern, and the communist term was extended or exploited by Gayatri Chakravarti Spivak to refer to women as subaltern. When women are subaltern and inferior, and why can't we call them diasporans. Every woman in the true sense of the word, subalternity or subaltern sensibility, a woman is a subaltern. When she happens to be subaltern, she is naturally treated as a diasporant, or she naturally undergoes a diasporic or the sense of non-belongingness experience at her own home. And Dalit and minority or the other sections of society who are politically, culturally, territorially, and sometimes legally, right? Legally segregated group of people. And the Dalits and minority are treated as second-class citizens. And Dalits in India, the blacks in Afro-American context, the blacks in America, Dalits in India, minorities in the entire world, or diasporans in one point of view. So the word diaspora does not refer to the particular section that has migrated to foreign country for business or by force. So minority and Dalit literatures are great discourses. And here my contention is this. That is, when Dalit literature or minority literature or feminist literature are treated as subaltern discourse, all these literatures are inevitably sharing the common sensibility of diaspora. And if you look at further, the deconstructionist varieties can be looked at as religious diaspora, economic diaspora, linguistic diaspora, techno diaspora, costume diaspora, cosmetic diaspora, and food as diaspora. Religion has got various divisions. Once I remember my reading of Cecil Rhodes, a South African imperialist prime minister. He says, I quote, "The world is nearly parceled out. What there is left of it is being divided up, conquered and colonized. I repeat, the world is nearly parceled out. What there is left of it is being divided up, conquered and colonized." And religion is not exempted from that. Religion has got multiple divisions as religions and religious sections, religious divisions, religious groups, religious communities, religious compartments. So there are compartmentalization in religion. There are compartments in the economic sections. There are different compartments in the linguistic area, and compartmentalization is innate in every package called religion, economy, language, technology, costume, cosmetics, and the food culture and whatnot. So in one religion, all are not treated equally. When there is no equality, the subaltern sensibility is all pervasive. Inevitably, it is very much present in every individual's psychic reservoir. A kind of superiority or kind of inferiority existing in themselves. All Muslims are not equally treated as Muslims. All Christians are not equally treated as Christians. In Christianity, a particular group is treated as subaltern. A particular group is inferior. In Islam, there is a particular group which enjoys the luxurious or the metropolitan lifestyle, and there is another section which is very much ignored and segregated and driven to the marginal section. So this is due to the economic, Adam Smith, the father of economics, says, poverty elsewhere, I quote, poverty elsewhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. Poverty elsewhere is a threat to prosperity everywhere. But in reality, I unquote, but in reality, poverty elsewhere makes the rich feel happy and happier. And this is because of the innate sense of discrimination in every human mind. So, linguistically speaking, Sanskritization of the required documents, Sanskritization for the sake of Sanskrit is a welcome note. But Sanskritization of all at the cost of a particular language is what you call imperialist tendency. And we can say theory is not the language of elite. Theory is not the language of elite. Theory is everywhere. Theory is in every form. Theory is everybody's cake. It is not that Eurocentrism has got theory, Hindutva has got a theory, or the dominant groups have got theory, and the minority groups or the subaltern groups or the diasporic groups do not have theories. No, it's not like that. Theory is not the language of elitism. Theory is everywhere. Theory is yours and theory is mine. Everybody has got a theory. Everybody has got a theory. Every discourse has got theory, as we have literary theory. Look at costume. For example, if you look at the Android technology, the Android technology has made someone feel diasporant and subaltern or inferior, and made someone superior and or elevated in the social ladder. So a technology decides one's identity. The possession of a costly Android technology on hand decides the identity of a person, how the person is socially recognized. And therefore, technology, costume, cosmetics, food are treated as some of the ingredients that create a sense of diaspora, or that create a sense of marginality, or that create a sense of subalternity. And if you look at further, diaspora can be looked at as an internal problem or intra-problem. Interdiaspora refers to a person who is diasporant between two communities or in a mixture of society. Intra-diaspora is an experience, is a sense of non-belongingness or a sense of otherness in his own community, in one's own religion, in one's own culture. In one's own culture, religion, locality, territory, a person feels diasporant, and that is intra-diaspora and cross-diaspora. When inter-diaspora and intra-diaspora come together, there is a possibility for cross-diaspora, and cross-diaspora leads to diaspora of violence, diaspora of terror, diaspora of capitalism, and diaspora of imperialism. I believe, I remember Lenin says, I quote, imperialism is the highest form of capitalism. Imperialism is the highest form of capitalism.
I repeat, uh, Lenin says the highest form of imperialism is capitalism. Imperialism is the root cause for diaspora. Imperialism is the root cause for subalternity, and imperialism is the root cause for all subjugation. And from this perspective, we can say inter-diaspora, intra-diaspora, cross-diaspora, multi-diaspora, and violence diaspora, terror diaspora, capitalist diaspora, and imperial diaspora are very much possibly analyzed by the deconstructionist researchers. To sum up, Michel Foucault presents the four schemata of knowledge in his book Archaeology of Knowledge. Archaeology of Knowledge, he gives the four schemata of knowledge, and he presents four strong terms: articulation, attribution, designation, and derivation. So any discourse as the articulation is presented in the form of text, in the form of speech, in the form of painting, maybe a symbol, maybe an icon, maybe a drawing, maybe maybe a cinema, maybe an advertisement, or in any form a discourse can be published. So what is said is articulation, but what is attributed to the discourse, what is added to the discourse, how it is interpreted, how the discourse is interpreted is attribution. So the attribution refers to the addition of meaning, or the attribution of interpretative meaning. Attribution of interpretative meaning. So what is said is articulation, and how it is interpreted is attribution, the attributed meaning. And diaspora originally refers to the problem of migrants, but if you look at the word attribution, researchers can attribute many meanings to the word diaspora. The homeless in their homeland are diasporant. The casteless in their own caste are diasporant. The religionless in their own religion are diasporant. The foodless in their own agricultural field are diasporant. So articulation, attribution lead to designation. Depending upon the articulation and the meaning, it is named. Naming is designation. How it is designated? Articulation, attribution, designation further lead to derivation. The different forms of presence, different structures of presence, how the designation, how the designated, attributed and articulated version is present, in what form it exists, that is the derivation. Derivation is the substructures. If diaspora is the central problem, and Derrida may arrive at the substructural problems of diaspora, and by substructural problems I mean the multidimensional existence of diasporans over the world. As I told you earlier, I quote, imperialism is the highest form of capitalism, says Lenin. If you look at the redefining from a deconstructionist standpoint, subaltern sensibility is the worst and painful form of diaspora. So, Antonio Gramsci, Ranajit Hugo, or Gayatri Spivak have extended the meaning of subaltern sensibility to different structures are the people of a community. But the subaltern sensibility is the worst and painful form of diaspora. The subaltern is the other, and a diasporant is also the other. He is neither subaltern nor the diasporant can be the one. Both are the others. No one belongs to stay. No one belongs to a stay. No one prolongs it anymore, and therefore diaspora is neither a sense of belongingness nor a sense of non-belongingness. It depends. It is a kind of arbitrariness. So diaspora is arbitrarily looked at. Diaspora is arbitrarily experienced. A diasporant in one place may be the ruler in the other place. A ruler in one place may be a diasporant in the other place. The minority in one territory may be the majority in the other territory. And therefore, now apart from the territorial belongingness or the communal belongingness, we can look at the other three factors: time, place, and home. Time, place, and home also have the notions of diaspora. Sometime, particular day is a good day. Particular day is a ill omen. Particular day is a very auspicious day. Particular home is a very auspicious, a lucky home. Particular place is a very divine. Particular place is very celestial in its nature, and therefore people go on tour. That becomes a tourist place. A particular day in a calendar becomes a notable day. A particular home becomes an identified home, and therefore